Noam Chomsky weighed in on the Iran deal on Al Jazeera America. Let's watch.
What exactly is the threat of Iran? That's the fundamental question. The deal does constrain what's called the Iranian threat, but what exactly is the threat? It's interesting that that question isn't raised, although actually it is raised.
But there is a nuclear nonproliferation treaty that Iran is a party to. Many believe Iran had violated that.
Iran is a party to it, and Iran has lived up to it. There are other countries that are not parties to it. Israel, for example, is not a party to it and has a huge nuclear weapons system, and the U.S. protects it. Pakistan is not a party to it. Its nuclear weapon system was developed with the support of the United States. India is not part of it.
Right.
It has an enormous nuclear weapon system supported by the United States.
Would you argue that Iran having nuclear weapons would be a good thing?
I don't think anyone would have nuclear weapons, including the United States. But that's not the issue. If Iran's alleged noncompliance with the NPT is an issue, and I add alleged, that certainly doesn't require sanctions or a treaty or any other actions.
Now, I know you've said before that the U.S. had no right to sanction Iran in the first place, but why not? The UN also imposed sanctions. And again, I know you're arguing that Iran may not have violated the NPT, but others argue that it did, that it's gone too far with its enrichment.
If it did, fine. Yeah. Then those countries, first of all, it's primarily the United States. The others are rather mild. But if countries are opposed to violation of the NPT, then fine, let's turn to the major violators, Israel, Pakistan, and India. I don't think anyone ought to have nuclear weapons, but notice that the analysis of U.S. intelligence is pretty reasonable. There's nothing Iran could do with a nuclear weapon except as a deterrent. And there are two countries in the region that do not want Iran to have a deterrent. The two countries that freely use force and violence in the region, primarily the United States, secondarily Israel.
But there are a lot more. There are a lot more countries in the world that don't want Iran.
I say these are the major ones. These are the major ones by far. Look, there are plenty of countries that are ugly and do ugly things, but take a look at the scale. There's no countries that rampage to anything like that extent. Furthermore, the U.S. is quite open about it. Just in the last few days, the Ashton Carter, commentators like Thomas Friedman, our ambassador Samantha Power, have stated quite openly that if we choose, we will use force against Iran. There is something called the United Nations Charter, which bars the threat or use of force in international affairs. But U.S. political leaders and leading commentators across the board say we're not bound by that.
You know, at times, I feel like Noam Chomsky is the only person on the planet that actually gives a shit about the law and applying it equally. So the U.S. and Israel and our allies will always bring up, international law, international law, international law, when a regime that we dislike starts violating it. But if it's us, or if it's one of our allies that violate it, mum's the word. In fact, like Chomsky just laid out there, they'll flat out say at times, like, no, if we violate it, it's totally okay. But do you not understand how ridiculous you are if that's the way you think? You're the textbook definition of a hypocrite. And what you're doing in that case is you're saying, I have defined the U.S. and our allies as the good guys no matter what we do. So our actions are now irrelevant because our intent is so great and we mean so well around the world that by definition we can't do anything wrong and we can't violate international law. Think about how crazy that is. Then you get to a point where it's no longer the case that you are what you do. So you get a situation like the CIA, with the blessing of the federal government, or I should say with the blessing of the Bush administration, they do torture, the worst kinds of torture, and it's detailed, and it violates every international law imaginable. But then they turn around and say, well, it's not like what? What are we going to do? We're going to be tried in an international court? Piss off. We did it, so therefore it's no longer clearly illegal, even though it is. It's now in the realm of the debatable, and it's a matter of opinion. Well, would you grant that same mentality to Iran if they were caught with the exact same set of facts that were the case with CIA torture? Would you say, well, come on, we're not going to call them a rogue state. I mean, they just did the same thing we did, so what are we going to do here? No, you wouldn't do that. You would say, oh, terrorist state, rogue state, bad actors, time for regime change. Would we accept it if anybody else said about the U.S. after the CIA torture memo was released? Would we accept it if anybody said, I think it's time for regime change in the U.S.? Greenland comes in and bombs Washington, D.C. and puts in a transitionary government because our government has been too terroristic for too long. Would we accept that? We'd be like, oh, that's totally cool. So why the fuck should we think it's okay when we do it to other people? See, that's what I mean when I say Chomsky actually gives a shit about the law. Everybody's so, oh my God, some idiots in Iran, the Ayatollah said they want to wipe Israel off the map. That's a violation of international law. He's making a direct threat. Chomsky's like, yeah, that's right, but we also do it too, and you had fucking bupkis to say when we did it. I told you the other day, Representative Duncan Hunter spoke about musing out loud about how we should bomb Iran. I'm sorry, not bomb Iran. That was Louis Gohmert who casually says it. John McCain said it as well. Duncan Hunter said we should nuke Iran. Sheldon Adelson, one of the top donors to the Republican Party, who really controls politics more than any individual politician, he said, yeah, we should drop a bomb just to show them we mean business. Drop a nuclear bomb. So why is it that when our politicians do it, when people who influence politics tremendously over here do it, no, we're the good guys. It's okay. So we threatened you. Who cares? Who cares? So we've proven that we act on our threats. Look at Iraq. Who cares? But when they do it, oh my God, evil terrorist state, rogue state, can't work with them under any circumstance. Totally disregarding history, totally disregarding things that we've done that are wrong, and understand in no way, shape, or form am I saying I like the government in Iran. Of course not. In many ways, they're a fucking theocracy. They banned, Western-style haircuts over there. Aspects of the government are fucking insane. They have a version of Sharia in place. Domestically, they are horrible. But that doesn't mean then that therefore we can overlook all of the crimes and the terrorist activities of the U.S. government when it comes to foreign policy. It's hilarious. We lecture the world about morality. Meanwhile, look at our foreign policy all the way post-World War II until today. Look during the Soviet era, for example. We overthrew untold numbers of democratically elected governments and put in dictators because we thought, hey, this is better than a possible democratic left-wing communist-like regime, so just put in a dictator and we don't care if they brutally repress their own population. Chomsky's one of the few people who steps up and says, I'm not going to overlook our crimes. I'm not going to look the fucked up things we do. Because everybody in the U.S. is so critical of every fuck-up anybody else does who's our enemy, why wouldn't we be equally as critical of our own fuck-ups? And why wouldn't we try to act in a way where we're responsible for our own actions? And finally, he says, what exactly is the threat of Iran? Yeah, what is the threat of Iran? Oh my God, but they said things that are terroristic and terrible threats, and yeah, we all condemn those, we all hate those. Are they going to act on it, though? We're more likely to act on our tough talk about bombing them than they are about wiping Israel off the map. They don't have the fucking capacity to wipe Israel off the map. Even if they get a nuke, do you really think that the government in Iran, a serious question, do you think that they are the equivalent of an ISIS regime, which hook, line, and sinker, some people in ISIS believe in a fundamentalist interpretation of Islam, and in their case it's, a Wahhabist approach. So there are people who are 100% brainwashed by their religion, and they would act to try to get to paradise, and they would press the button to, drop a nuke on anybody. That's not the government in Iran. I fucking hate the government in Iran. But you think you could get unanimous agreement from everybody there? Oh, nonsense. You don't think Hassan Rouhani would go, whoa, dog? Do you know nothing about Hassan Rouhani? Apparently you don't. I mean, if you think that a guy like Hassan Rouhani would sit there as the Ayatollah's like, okay, I'm going to wipe Israel off the map. He'd go, oh my God, then we die like 3 seconds later. The U.S. military budget is tremendous. Israel's military budget is tremendous. Iran's military budget is rinky-dink nothing. Okay, this idea that, oh my God, they're such a big bad threat. How big of a pussy are you if you think that? They know the second they do anything against anybody who's our ally, they'd be blown to smithereens. They would never do it. They wouldn't dare do it. And if you think otherwise, you just don't know anything about world politics. I'm sorry.